Welcome to the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner along with my co-host Ian Rivers. And Ian, we have an interesting situation this week. We got an interesting kind of look with how our podcast is going. If you're watching on the YouTube, Facebook, Twitter live streams, currently it's just Ian's face up there because apparently my camera's broken. I've looked at it one too many times, I guess. And this is where we're sitting. So I'm currently doing this, Ian, from the Fargo Dome parking lot. Just for those who are unaware.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that you
I
had to
am
be in North Dakota, but
I know. And so I'm sitting here in the parking lot doing I had some high school football games, and now I have a volleyball game in area tonight. So I'm just kind of stuck in Fargo. So figure we might as well bang out a podcast. Ian, you look nice and cozy in your house. How are things going with you, and what's going on in Beaverland?
oh, not too bad. Not too bad. Halloween came and went. Hopefully everybody had a happy holiday and got their trick-or-treating in, got some candy. But yeah, Beaverland, that's a story we're willing to tell here over the next half hour or so.
Yeah, so why don't we let's just get the bad out of the way. Ian, volleyball had a tough weekend like we talked about, and it was for sure a tough weekend.
Yeah, they got swept by Concordia St. Paul in St. Paul. That's, they're the number 4 team in the country. You're not going to expect too much out of that game. When the surprises come, you're happy, but that's about to be expected. And then going to Mankato and losing in 4 sets. They took the first set and we got pretty excited because we thought, man, maybe this is our ticket to the playoffs, getting a win over Minnesota State and getting some momentum going towards the end of the season. And yeah, they lose in 4 sets. So they've lost now 4 games in a row. So opportunities this weekend, Augustana at home on Friday, and Wayne State, the number 1 team in the country, also at home on Saturday afternoon. In terms of the playoff picture, it's looking pretty bleak. And, like we talked about, that's not super, super disappointing given the expectations of this team coming into the season. But we are currently 3 games behind Sioux Falls for one of those last playoff spots, and there's only 4 games to go. And like we talked about, one of those games is against number 1 in the country. So it's looking a little bleak for the playoffs, but the expectations and what this season has still been a very good thing.
Yeah, exactly. Not too much I can really add on there. You pretty much took the words out of my mouth on that one. So let's kind of shift gears here and move towards women's soccer. They're a team that had some expectations, and they're a team that didn't necessarily have a great weekend. Ian, what happened?
They've not really had a great month, honestly. It kind of started around late September. That game against Southwest is the first one to me that really jumped off the page. That started a little bit of a. It's been kind of like a men's hockey last season, a little bit of that trend. They started off really well. They hadn't lost in 9 or 10 games. And now, the last 2 weeks especially have been rather disappointing. A tie on Friday in St. Paul, 0-0 against Concordia. And I thought they were the better team in that game. They played really well. It's just they couldn't put one in the net. And, we've talked about the offense all year, and maybe wrongfully so because they hadn't been shut out in so long. And now the last 3 games, you have 0 goals. And so it seems like it's starting to rear its ugly head. All of the concerns that we maybe had are coming true. And now, of course, spoiler alert, 0 goals. And they gave up 4 to Minnesota State, 0-4 loss against Mankato in Mankato on Sunday. So the Beavers clinched a playoff spot. That's the only positive side from this last weekend. Whether it's home or away will be decided this evening. So the Beavers have Minnesota Duluth on the docket. That game, well, depending on when you hear this, you probably will have missed the game. But if they win, they have a decent chance, depending on what happens to Augustana and UMary, to climb up the rankings. And let's take a quick look at who those 2 teams play. Augustana plays Southwest in Marshall, and UMary plays Northern State in Aberdeen. So both of those teams are on the road. If the Beavers can pick up 3 points at home, they could potentially host a game at the Chet for the NSIC playoffs, and then it's off to whoever's the remaining highest seed if they win that. But yeah, look for the Beavers to hopefully turn this season around and come and beat Duluth, on their home field in this final game of the regular season.
Yeah, crazy to think that we're already at the final game of the regular season, and with this team, and just with it's been a tale of two seasons, pretty much. The like you talked about, Ian, that first month and change was really solid, and October has been scary in more ways than one, I guess, for women's soccer. And just I guess quickly, what's the one thing we won't dive into this too much because we're a little pressed for time here today, but what's one thing that kind of women's soccer needs to do to turn this thing around? If they could do one certain thing, Ian, what do you think that is that can kind of at least just get things pushed in the right direction?
Well, I mean, you got to look at the offense and say you've got to score goals because 1 point isn't going to be good enough to leapfrog you. I mean, there might be some tiebreakers that it would come down to. Well, you don't own a tiebreaker with you, Mary or Augustana, so you're going to have to win this game against Duluth to turn that around, and just hope that the defense kind of corrects itself. They've been pretty good outside of the Minnesota State game. Obviously, 4 goals is like more than they've given up in a long time. I don't think they've given up more than 2 on the season to anybody else, and that was on one occasion to you, Mary. So offensively is really the place that it's got to turn around. But we should remind you also, either way, home or away, the first NSIC tournament playoff game will be next Monday, November 6th. Time is to be determined. Place is to be determined. That's all going to be determined tonight and set up. The top 8 teams in the NSIC will make the NSIC tournament.
Hey, let's talk about some good stuff with Bemidji State. The football team had a pretty impressive victory for most of the game. I know Ian will probably talk about kind of how things towards the end of that football game, but for the most part, an impressive victory on the road against a ranked opponent, against the UMD Bulldogs. I mean, Bemidji State was able to do really whatever they wanted for a lot of that game. What did you think overall of the Beavers winning now 3 in a row against the Bulldogs?
I thought it was really good. I thought it was a really good game. They came out and they did what they needed to do. They did exactly what we talked about last week, and that is get in front of the Bulldogs because they are not a team that is built to come back on you. And when you're up entering the fourth quarter 38-17, you're going to have a decent shot to win that game. And they really just controlled it all the way up until that fourth quarter. And that's really what the Beavers need to figure out is that fourth quarter, because it gets a little bit ugly come the fourth quarter of most of their football games. UMD kind of had a little bit of a comeback. It wasn't necessarily something you want to see. They made a really good defensive play. Sage Booker had a 74-yard touchdown run.
Yeah, that helps.
And then it was answered by we did the answering. I'm so sorry. We did the answering in this game. So that was good because in the game against Wayne State, we, of course, got a pick 6, and then on the next play gave up a 78-yard touchdown pass. This time, it was Duluth who got a big touchdown pass, and Sage Booker was able to get a 74-yard touchdown run to kind of put the game back at arm's distance. Like I said, it was a little bit sketchy there at the end. You know, you're maybe allowing them to do a little bit more than you would like, but overall, hey, it's a win over a top 25 team. And, you know, maybe you want it to be a 2-score game just because look at us, look how dominant we were. Now all the box score watchers from around the country just look at it and see, oh, you know, they won by 7, but doesn't, you know, it's impressive, but could be more. But yeah, I mean, either way, there wasn't really a bad unit on the team today, or I'm sorry, this last weekend. Brandon Alt, 19 of 26, 271 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. That's such a big thing. I think he's really cut down on the interceptions this year. Has not been a game that you've really felt like the other team has been allowed to stay in the game because of multiple interceptions by Brandon, and that's a big thing for him. The running game looked really good in this game. Sage Booker only carried the ball 7 times, and of course that 74-yarder will skew some of his stats, but he had 121 yards on the ground. Ali Muhammad, 12 for 57, and Jaden Washington actually led the team in carries. I thought he played pretty well, running the ball 14 times for 57 yards, and then I think he got involved in the passing game. Yeah, he had a 14-yard screen pass as well, so overall, a really good game. Del Duncan Busby, 6 catches for 75. Jake Hill had a pretty good game, 4 catches for 60 and a touchdown. It's just kind of more of the same. Beavers really spreading the ball around offensively, getting a lot of people involved, and it worked out. The defense played pretty well.
Yeah, and I think overall the defense played well early and the offense was able to get ahead. And really, UMD is a team that wants to run the football, and if you keep the game close, they're going to grind you away and try and grind you to dust. And for Bemidji State, a team that likes to score, likes to get ahead early and play fast and loose, for them to be able to have it break their way early, when they got up 14-0, I was like, well, dang, they're going to win. Like, they should win this game now. This isn't they got a chance, they got a whatever. I mean, when they got up 2 scores, it's like, well, this is perfect because UMD is not built to come back on a 2-score deficit, especially against a good offense like Bemidji State. And it just got them down early, and UMD just was never able to catch up. Now, they were, they made it close a couple times. They certainly chipped away at it, but Bemidji State basically got them out at arm's length and never really let them get back into the ball game.
Right, and that's really all you can ask for, especially against a team like Duluth, who is a really, really solid opponent. And now, you've put them kind of on the back burner in terms of the NSIC race, and you're very much alive to win the conference. You're very much in a playoff position, come towards the end of the year, just like we talked about. So overall, very good weekend. Yeah, I think the defense did a really good job containing. Wall Jasper had some runs, but for the most part, it was kind of drive by drive. Like, there was drives where he wouldn't be able to do a thing, and you're like, well, man, this Beavers defense is really taking over. And then the next drive, he'd come out and find all these holes, and you're like, well, this isn't the same defense we saw on the last drive. And then they'd come out and they'd sack him 3 times in a row again. And it was kind of drive by drive. It was a little spotty and inconsistent in when he would actually have success on the ground. But overall, I think the Beavers did obviously enough to win the game. And really nobody else was able to hurt them other than Wall Jasper.
Yeah, exactly. And even when he was able to hurt him, like you said, he was just so on and off. Bemidji State was just in such a good position, Ian, to win this game. And things don't get much easier. They got 2 games left, and they basically need to make sure that they go 1-1 in those 2 games. Let's just talk about Moorhead here. It's the final home game of the season. Ian, you've kind of been you've been a little nervous about this one for the last month or so.
I've had my eye on this one for a long time because of the style of play that Moorhead uses. They are an air raid offense. So I'm looking for the Beavers to drop a lot of men back and try and contain. There's so many plays that I just feel like I don't know if we're blitzing the safeties too much. There's a lot of plays that you watch it and you're like, where is the safety help over the top? There is nobody there. And if the corner gets beat, it's over. The play is a touchdown 100% of the time, unless the quarterback misses the throw. And Moorhead's not going to do that because they have a pretty good quarterback over there. So it's going to be a tough game just based off of matchups. I think offensively, you can absolutely keep pace with Minnesota State. Their defense isn't necessarily the best in the conference, but at the same time, you have to be consistent offensively and keep going blow for blow for them. I think it's going to be a close game. Obviously, they're not ranked. They are currently 6-3. It's still a good game, though. This would be a big win for the Beavers to add to their resume. They're picking up a lot of hopefully quality wins here at the end of the season. And this would be another big one here. Minnesota State, they look way more consistent than they've looked in years past. And the Beavers' pass defense has not been the most consistent part of their team. They can make some interceptions, and hopefully the defensive line can create enough pressure blitzing 3 or 4 where they can, get the quarterback off of his game and force him into some bad throws, maybe generate those turnovers. But turnovers aren't the most reliable form of defense all the time. But if you can generate a couple in this game and win the turnover battle, I think you have a really good chance.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ian. I think, it's going to be an interesting concept because Duluth was a power run team, and that's what the challenge presented on defense. But the Beavers have done a decent job against the power run teams. And, Ian, you've liked to mention kind of that pass defense and back and forth kind of throughout the season. So we'll see now against 2 teams that like to throw the ball a lot, kind of will likely come down to turnovers because the more you throw the ball, the more you do stuff like that, the more likely it is for a turnover. So we'll see what happens in that matchup. Ian, I know we don't have a ton of time, so for everybody listening, for full transparency, the laptop I'm working on is not plugged into anything because I'm in the parking lot of a building, and we don't have a ton of time here. So let's wrap things up talking about men's hockey. They got a big sweep over the Tommies at home. What'd you like in the men's hockey series, Ian?
Well, I want to just we're not going to go around the NSIC completely, but I do want to touch on the fact that Augustana was upset by Wayne State this weekend in Wayne, Nebraska. It was an absolute snow globe on the field. It reminded me a lot of like San Francisco and Chicago in week 1 last year, where it's just like, how does the offense even operate in this situation?
Right.
Wayne State 14, Augustana 12. So that means the standings currently look like this: Augustana, Bemidji State, and Mankato all tied at 7-1. So that means if the Beavers just win out, they at least clinch a shared title with Minnesota State, depending on how they finish the year. And then I guess the only other thing is currently the Beavers are 7th in the regional rankings. I was a little bit surprised they were that low, but yeah, 7th. So they're in right now. And I think if they win at least one of their last 2 games, it would be a little bit hard to imagine that they wouldn't make it, but we'll touch on that a little bit more next week still.
Yeah, exactly. So we got a lot of stuff to talk about, especially once we get into that men's hockey sphere. And again, shorter podcast than normal. Do apologize for that, but we are going to finish up talking some men's hockey here. And full disclosure, for those of you listening, if this cuts out at any point, likely my laptop battery died. So, Ian, what do you have to say about men's hockey over the weekend?
I was really impressed with what I saw. Honestly, this was a really good weekend because we talked about. They looked decent against Duluth. They looked bad, but they looked good at certain things. And it was a little bit inspiring seeing them score 4 goals on Saturday night at home. And then they come out and they played really well. That Friday night game, they dominated St. Thomas from whistle to whistle. It was just a really good game. The 2 goals that Tommies actually scored this weekend were like, I don't want to discredit them because they got the puck to the net, but they were like the flukiest little goals you've ever seen. Just happened around the goaltender. And, those are the ones you kind of feel gross giving up because you're like, wow, they didn't even like put a great shot on the net. It just happened to deflect and go in, or the goalie didn't see it all the way through. But yeah, I mean, they almost scared us. Gavin Enright had to come into the game on Friday night. Matthias Scholl picked up an injury. It looked like a muscle injury to his lower body. So we're going to be monitoring that, and hopefully we get some updates on Matthias and whether or not he's good to go for the remainder of the season. Hopefully it's not a serious injury, maybe just a couple of weeks. But
I mean, could be huge if it's bad.
Right. And, if it is bad, then they need Enright to step up and play like he did in these 2 games. He gave up 1 goal in 4 periods, shutting out the Tommies on Saturday when they ultimately looked probably better than the Beavers. And even in that 3rd period on Friday night, he made some great saves, especially in that dreaded last 2 minutes of the game, where I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to give up a goal with 2.5 minutes to go. And then they're going to give another one up with like 30 seconds and the Tommies are going to tie the game. But he stood tall in net and the defense did what they needed to do. And then it was 1-0. And hey, they did another good job of putting the game away. Leighton Road found the empty net for his 3rd goal of the weekend. He is currently 2nd in the CCHA with 6 goals in 6 games. So
is that good?
He's having a phenomenal year so far. I don't know if I expect the 1 goal per game to keep up, but he's going to have quite a few goals come the end of this season. So I thought it was really good. What's that?
Hasn't been the thing with so I know that Lucas of Beaver Territory, friend of the podcast, has mentioned this on Twitter. When's the last time Bemidji State was it a 40-goal score? When's the last time they've had one?
It would be a 20-goal score.
20-goal score. There you go. That's the number.
Is like
40-goal score. You're probably doing some. Yeah, you're probably in the league at that point.
Right. But the last 20-goal scorer for the Beavers was Matt Reed, I believe, in the 2010-2011 season. And of course, Matt Reed,
Minnesota Wild legend, Matt Reed. Yeah.
Right. Yes. So it's been a long time, and obviously, I felt bad kind of quoting that tweet, and I was like, man, am I gonna jinx Leighton if I do this early in the season? He's only got 6 goals. It's not like he's at 15, already. But yeah, he's on track right now to be that next 20-goal scorer for the Beavers. So hopefully, but ultimately what matters is the results on the ice. And right now, the Beavers are 1st in the CCHA with 6 points. Northern Michigan and Ferris, they kind of split this weekend, or they did split. Northern Michigan lost in overtime on Friday night, and then they won in regulation on Saturday night. So they are at 4 points. Ferris State is at 2. Everybody else is at 0. So good start for the Beavers. And you got a tough little opponent coming up here. Lake Superior State's look pretty decent. I believe they won both of their games out in New York this weekend against St. Lawrence. And
I think so, yeah.
Actually, I have the schedule pulled up so I can verify that I'm correct. They won 5-2 on Saturday over St. Lawrence, and they won 4-3 in overtime over Clarkson on Friday night. So 2 not that bad hockey programs there out in New York, and on the road too, getting a sweep over essentially an ECAC opponent. So that's not a bad team there in Sault Ste. Marie. Sault Ste. Marie, whatever it is.
That's too French. I can't understand it.
Right. And I don't know what to expect from this weekend. I'm going to have to say it's probably going to be a split. And obviously I'm hoping for more. And I think that the Beavers could get more out of that. But it's on the road. That's never an easy thing to go on the road and get a sweep. I guess unless you're Wisconsin, which, by the way, that loss to Wisconsin, getting to overtime against them, just looks better and better every week. Obviously,
looks so good.
Swept the Gophers, the number 1 team in the country, at home.
I think they're 4th now, Wisconsin, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I've looked at the polls this week, but
they got to be ranked now for sure. So, after that,
that's a good loss. That's a very good loss. Taking it to overtime was the better part of that loss. So. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with what I've seen from the Beavers so far this year. Obviously, you're always going to feel really good after a home sweep
over a conference opponent.
The only negative from this weekend was really the attendance. And I'm not going to sit up here on my soapbox. Obviously, I live in South Central Minnesota, so I can't get to every game. But man, we talked how the attendance had been pretty good against Duluth, and we were excited because it's another Minnesota opponent, and maybe you get good. It was really bad. That might have been one of the worst weekends I've ever seen. You would think that it was a February series against Lake Superior State at home, and the Beavers have 3 wins on the season. That's what it looked like. This is a good hockey team, and I mean, I don't know what we got to do. Who it falls upon? Does it fall upon the athletic department? Does it fall upon the fans that they just aren't getting out? I don't know what it is, man, but we want to see more people in the stands than that because, the student section was fine, but it definitely was not full. And man, it looked really, really empty in there. And I get it. It's Halloween weekend and it's hunting season. There's always going to be an imperfect excuse, but to have it be that low early in the season for an in-conference, in-state opponent, that was a little disappointing, but we'll see. We'll see. Now that they've got that sweep under their belt, maybe people are a little bit believing now.
And I think Lucas made a good point of saying, like, they're a good team. Like, we can get behind them. Like, don't, I know, like, it's early in the season. You get out, you get to your couple games. And, again, I don't necessarily I live within an hour and a half, 2 hours of Bemidji, but, I'm not going to get to every hockey game either. Like, nobody is. There's rarely people that are. But go out and support this team when you can, because this is a good hockey team, and we're going to see that throughout the season. And we want people to come support, because we like Beaver sports. That's why we're doing a podcast. And if you're listening, I'm sure you like it. And I know some people don't always live in Bemidji who are listening, but get out there and try and make a game if you can. Sanford Center is a great experience, especially when it's packed. I mean, it's one of the, obviously it's not a hockey cathedral, like with history-wise and prestige, but the Sanford Center is a fun rink. When that crowd's going, it's fun. Bemidji State hockey has a chance to be fun again this year. So this is our endorsement. Go to some hockey games when you can. Ian, anything else you want to mention while we are on the podcast here? Anything else you want to get out there about BSU men's hockey?
Yeah, I guess one thing about them is just that, this conference is wide open. Michigan Tech, I don't believe, has a win on the season yet. They played the same schedule as Lake Superior State this weekend, and they lost to Clarkson on Friday night 3-1, and then that was on Saturday, sorry. And then on Friday, they tied St. Lawrence 2-2. So for Michigan Tech, I don't believe they've picked up a win yet this season. A couple ties.
Very unfortunate. You just hate to see it.
Right. It's so disappointing to see that. They are 0-4-3 on the season.
Oh, man.
So it's a wide open conference. Northern Michigan hasn't looked necessarily super elite. Mankato started off strong with a sweep over St. Cloud State, but I think that was more of an indictment on St. Cloud State than it was on how good Mankato is, because they're 2-3-1 on the season. So really, it's a wide open conference, and I think this is the time to do it. Get your points now. Go out. Obviously, the Beavers have had good starts the past couple of seasons to CCHA play, and it kind of falls off later in the season. And we will touch on that when we get there. But, this is a good start to get a sweep at home against an opponent that was, quite frankly, getting a little bit overrated for being a team that was 2-3-1 on the season. Yes, they had some good results against St. Cloud State, who, again, stinks, is the worst team in the state this year. And then Minnesota, who apparently stinks as well. So Bemidji State, top team in the state of Minnesota this year, not named. Well, they might be better than the Wild as well. I don't know. I don't want to see those two teams play, but I'm going to go ahead and put them over the Wild in the power rankings right now. So.
All right, perfect. That's a perfect note to end this podcast on, Ian. Apologize again for the short pod today. Just been a little busy with my schedule. We'll have another one for you next week, and we'll have a full dive in and deep dive of everything. So follow us on Facebook, Twitter, wherever else you can find your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those places. And we got some fun stuff coming up through the season, so keep following us on the Beaver Banter podcast, and we will see you guys next week for another episode when that becomes available. And again, we'll have more to talk about, more to break down as that gets closer. So we'll see you guys next time.